under the shadow of a broken moon and the dim glow of a dying star. A human traveler named Marcus drifted through the forgotten system in his worn ship, searching only for scrap fuel and quiet space, away from the endless wars of the larger galaxy, when suddenly his ship's sensors picked up a faint signal, not mechanical or coded but raw and living, a cry that pierced even the static of the comm system and shook him to the core. It was a child's voice, trembling with desperation and fear, and though Marcus had ignored many things in his life, this was one sound he could not let pass. The message was fragmented, broken by interference, yet clear enough to understand words that carried more weight than the vast emptiness surrounding him. "My mom is stuck, please help her, human." Marcus frowned. The plea was strange. The child had called him human, not traveler, not stranger, and that meant whoever sent it knew exactly what he was, and that raised more questions than answers. Few alien species in this corner of space had seen humans before, and those that had often spoke of them in hushed tones as predators, as survivors, as something best avoided. Marcus leaned forward, adjusting the comms, and responded in a steady voice, "Where are you and who are you?" The reply was a sobbing whisper that filled his ship's cabin with urgency. "I am Kale, my mom. She is trapped in the mines. The walls fell, and she cannot move. Please, I do not know what to do." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment. He could almost turn away. He had done it before when cries for help came from smugglers, pirates, or desperate scavengers who only wanted to lure him into traps. But there was something about the voice, the raw innocence, that reminded him of a past he had buried long ago. He guided his ship toward the source, a shattered planet whose surface was cracked like old glass. Long abandoned mining colonies clung to its equator. Now silent except for the flicker of unstable power grids, the ship descended, with a shudder landing near the largest collapse zone, dust still rising from vents in the broken ground. A small figure emerged from behind a jagged rock, clutching a glowing shard of crystal for light. Marcus stepped down from his ramp, his boots sinking into the soft red dust. The boy could not have been more than 8 in human years, his skin a pale violet, his eyes wide and glimmering with hope as soon as he saw Marcus. He ran forward, tugging at the human's sleeve. "Please, you came, you really came." The human studied him carefully. He wore no armor, no mask, only the ragged clothing of miners, his small chest heaving from both fear and relief. Marcus crouched to his level, steadying the boy with a hand. "Tell me, where is your mother?" The boy pointed toward a gaping hole in the ground where twisted beams and stone blocked a tunnel mouth deep within. Marcus could see faint sparks of light flickering like dying stars that meant active systems still powered, which meant danger. As much as hope. Together, they climbed down into the ruins. The air was heavy, stale, and tinged with a metallic taste that clung to Marcus's tongue. He handed the boy a scrap mask from his pack, but even with it, the child trembled, his small hands clinging tightly to the human's arm. The tunnel walls were scorched, lined with abandoned mining equipment, some long broken, some still humming faintly from forgotten power supplies. Marcus kept his eyes sharp, his hand near the battered rifle on his back. He had walked into too many ruins not to expect threats, whether beast machine or worse. Still, the boy's desperate pace kept him moving faster than his instincts would have liked. The sound of distant shifting rock echoed through the cavern, and the boy cried out, "That is where she is, we must hurry." Marcus slowed, pulling him back one step. "Patience," he said softly. "The ground is unstable, you must let me go first." The boy bit his lip, his eyes wide with tears, but nodded. Marcus tested each step, the ground groaning beneath his boots. Dust rained from the ceiling, yet he pressed forward, soon reaching a narrow section where the tunnel had caved. He knelt and listened past the stones and twisted beams. Faintly he heard it, the muffled sound of breath, strained, shallow, and weak. The boy gasped. "You hear her, yes, she is alive." Marcus nodded, a tight feeling in his chest. He had heard many last breaths before, but this one carried a stubborn rhythm, still fighting against the weight of the earth. He turned to the boy, gripping his shoulder firmly. "She is alive, but it will take more than speed to free her. If you want me to help, we do this together, but you must listen to everything I say. Do you understand?" The boy nodded fiercely, his small hands shaking but determination burning in his eyes. Marcus knew then that whatever came next would not be simple. The mines held dangers that neither child nor mother understood, and perhaps not even him. But he also knew one thing with clarity: he could not walk away from this. Not now. Not after hearing that first desperate cry in the dark. The boy led Marcus deeper into the collapsed mine, his small frame darting between fallen beams and broken machinery, while Marcus kept a steady watch behind him, every step echoing in the stale air. The tunnels grew darker as they moved further from the surface, and the weak glow of the boy's crystal shard flickered in uncertain patterns, casting shadows that stretched across the stone walls. The boy's voice trembled, yet carried urgency. "She is down this way." The walls fell when the drills screamed and the ground shook, and no one came to help. Marcus felt the boy's grip tighten around his hand, the small fingers cold with fear. He understood the weight of abandonment all too well, but he kept his own emotions silent, focusing only on each step they took. The deeper they went, the more Marcus realized the mine was not simply abandoned. Something had forced the workers to flee in haste. The air was thick with the smell of burnt metal, and ozone-faint scorch marks lined the walls, and he could see shattered drones scattered across the ground as if something had destroyed them in a frenzy. He crouched to inspect one of the machines, its metal shell torn apart not by tools but by claws. Long curved gouges ran across its plating. The boy saw his look and whispered, "The beasts, they came after the collapse. They hunt in the dark." Marcus's jaw tightened, so it was not just falling stone and broken machinery. They were heading into the nest of predators. The boy shivered, but pressed forward, his determination outweighing his fear. Marcus admired the courage, though he said nothing. Instead, he kept his rifle loose, in his grip, ready for the inevitable. He had fought enough creatures on enough forgotten worlds to know the sound of stalking predators, the scrape of claws across stone, the faint hiss of breath from unseen throats. The first sign came when the tunnel widened into a cavern, a broken lift shaft descending into the abyss below. Marcus raised his hand for silence. The boy froze, his crystal light trembling in his grip. Then they both heard it, a growl, low and guttural, rolling through the chamber, followed by the scuttle of something massive across the rocks. Marcus pushed the boy behind him. "Keep quiet. Do not move." The boy obeyed, his wide eyes reflecting terror in the dim light. From the shadows emerged a beast like nothing Marcus had seen before, a twisted form of sinew and bone with 4 legs bent backward and a mouth bristling with jagged teeth. Its skin shimmered with a faint glow blending into the cavern walls, as though it was born from the stone itself. The boy gasped softly, but Marcus raised his finger to his lips and then moved with deliberate calm. He reached for a loose chunk of metal and hurled it across the cavern. The sound clattered loudly, and the beast snapped its head toward the noise, lunging with terrifying speed. Marcus seized the boy, pulling him to the side as rubble scattered around them. He raised his rifle, the old weapon humming as it fired bolts of searing light. The beams struck the beast's flank, burning into its hide and making it shriek, a piercing sound that rattled the cavern ceiling. The boy covered his ears, trembling as Marcus fired again and again, driving the creature back step by step, yet it refused to fall. Marcus cursed under his breath, shifting his aim toward the creature's legs. One shot struck true. The beast stumbled, crashing into the cavern wall and sending dust cascading down. The human wasted no time, pulling the boy with him through a narrow side tunnel just as the beast recovered and roared, its fury echoing through the stone. They ran, the boy gasping for breath, Marcus dragging him onward until the sounds of the beast faded behind them, replaced only by the groan of shifting earth. The boy stumbled, but Marcus steadied him, his voice steady, though his heart still raced. "Are you hurt?" The boy shook his head, his eyes wet with tears but burning with new awe. "You fought it like it was nothing." Marcus did not answer, instead, scanning the tunnel ahead. He had only bought them time. The beast would not give up so easily. He knelt before the boy, gripping his shoulders firmly. "Listen to me, Cale. If we are to reach your mother, we must move carefully. There will be more of them, and the tunnels are unstable. But we will not stop." The boy nodded, swallowing, his fear, his trust in the human growing with every step. They pressed forward, the air thicker now, the tunnel lined with old mining rails and half-buried carts. A faint sound reached them through the stone, a voice weak and muffled calling faintly, "Cale." The boy froze, tears spilling from his eyes. "Mother, she is close." Marcus felt the weight of the moment settle on him. Their journey into the dark was only beginning, and already the dangers multiplied. He could hear in the mother's faint cry, both hope and desperation, and he knew that what came next would demand more of him than brute strength. It would demand every ounce of cunning and resolve he had ever learned on the countless battlefields of forgotten worlds. The tunnel narrowed as Marcus and Cale moved forward, the boy clutching his glowing shard with both hands while the human kept his rifle raised and senses sharp. The faint cry of the mother echoed again through the stone, weaker now, and Marcus knew they had little time left before she might fall silent forever. The mine had shifted into a place of constant tension, every wall leaning dangerously, every beam groaning under the weight of collapse. Yet there was something more than falling stone, lurking in the silence. The air was alive with faint vibrations. Marcus felt them through his boots like the heartbeat of the mine itself. The boy whispered that the beasts had lived here even before the miners came, that his people had warned the companies not to dig so deep, but no one had listened. Marcus was not surprised. Greed had dug graves across every corner of the galaxy. He tightened his grip on the rifle and pressed on. As they entered a wider chamber, the dim glow of the shard revealed scattered bones, some alien, some not, the remnants of miners who had been caught when the predators arrived. Cale gasped and looked away, but Marcus studied the remains, noting the jagged tears and deep bite marks. He did not speak of it aloud. Instead, he placed a steadying hand on the boy's shoulder, urging him onward. The cavern narrowed again into a twisted passage, and the faint light revealed something new. Glowing eyes peering from the cracks, Marcus stopped, holding Cale back as a shape crawled into view, another beast smaller than the first but no less deadly. Its limbs skittering across the walls with unnatural speed. It let out a hiss and leapt downward straight toward them. Marcus swung the rifle up, but the tunnel ceiling was too low to maneuver quickly. The beast struck hard, knocking the weapon from his grasp and slamming him against the wall. Its claws slashed across his jacket, tearing through the fabric and scraping his skin. Marcus roared in pain but refused to yield. He reached to his belt, pulling free a survival blade, and drove it upward into the beast's side. Hot blood sprayed across the tunnel walls as the creature shrieked, thrashing violently. The boy screamed, but instead of running, he raised the glowing shard high and smashed it against the beast's head. The crystal cracked, releasing a burst of bright light that blinded the creature long enough for Marcus to twist the blade deeper until it collapsed with a shuddering cry. Marcus shoved the twitching body aside and retrieved his rifle, breathing hard, his muscles burning from the struggle. The boy trembled, his small frame shaking, yet there was fire in his eyes now. Not just fear, but courage. Marcus knelt, lowering himself to Cale's level, and said, "You did well, you stood your ground." The boy nodded, though tears still clung to his cheeks. "My mother needs me, I cannot stop now." Marcus placed the broken shard into the boy's hand, the glow weaker but still burning faintly, and said, "Then we will not stop." They pressed on the path, sloping downward until the tunnel opened into a vast chamber filled with collapsed mining rigs, twisted towers of steel and stone that formed a maze of shadows. The sound of machinery still hummed faintly in the distance, ancient systems running without purpose. Marcus studied the layout, noting the unstable structures overhead. Any wrong move could bring the entire place crashing down. In the center of the chamber, half buried beneath fallen beams, a figure struggled weakly, a woman, her violet skin dulled with dust and her limbs pinned under tons of wreckage. Her eyes flickered open at their approach, and a faint voice carried across the chamber. Cale, is that you?" The boy let out a cry of joy and rushed forward, but Marcus pulled him back sharply. "Wait there," he said. The chamber was too quiet, too still. Marcus scanned the wreckage, and then he saw them hidden in the shadows near the fallen machines. Cold red optics, flickering defense drones, their sensors still active even after decades of abandonment. The collapse had not shut them down. It had woken them, and they were locked in guard mode. He counted 3, maybe more, their shapes shifting as they detected movement. Cale looked at Marcus. With pleading eyes desperate to reach his mother, Marcus's jaw tightened. He knew what came next would decide everything. He could try brute force and risk the whole cavern crashing down, or he could find a way to outwit the machines. The boy tugged at his sleeve, whispering, "We must hurry, she is trapped, she will die." Marcus placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder and whispered back, "She will not die, but if we move foolishly, none of us will leave this place alive." The boy swallowed hard, his small body trembling, yet he nodded his trust in the human unshaken. Marcus's eyes hardened as he studied the drones, their patterns, their weapons, their blind spots. The next move would demand not just strength, but cunning and resolve. He had walked into battlefields where the odds were worse and survived. This time, survival meant more than his own life. It meant the life of a mother and the future of a boy who had placed every ounce of hope in him. Marcus crouched low behind a pile of shattered metal, his eyes locked on the drones that lingered near the fallen alien woman. Their movements were slow but deliberate, scanning beams slicing through the dust-filled air and illuminating broken machinery with sharp bursts of red light. The woman was pinned by heavy steel and stone, and every time she tried to move, the drones reacted as if she were the intruder. Cale clutched Marcus's sleeve, his face pale with fear and urgency, whispering that they must hurry. But Marcus raised a hand for silence. His mind worked quickly. He had seen machines like these before, relics of forgotten empires left to guard ruins long after their makers were gone. They did not understand compassion or family. They understood only their programming, and to them anyone who touched the wreckage was a threat. He studied the chamber carefully, noticing the dangling beams overhead and the clusters of loose rock hanging by the thinnest support. The entire place was ready to collapse under the slightest disturbance. Marcus knew he had to be careful, not only for the drones but for the unstable cavern itself. He motioned to Cale to stay low and keep still, then slid silently to another cover point, moving with the patience of a predator. The drones swept their lights across the chamber, but he kept outside their rhythm, calculating the intervals. When he reached a vantage point where he could see them clearly, he realized there were more than 3, at least 6, still operational, their joints creaking yet, their weapons glowing faintly with power. A direct assault would be suicide. Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment, recalling old lessons from forgotten wars. He remembered how humans had survived battles not because of strength alone, but because of cunning. He whispered to Cale, "Stay here and do not move, no matter what you hear." The boy shook his head, fear and defiance mixing in his expression, but Marcus placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You already proved your courage, but if you follow me now, you will only put your mother at greater risk. Trust me and stay hidden." Cale bit his lip and finally nodded, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. Marcus moved forward, slipping into the maze of broken machines. He gathered scraps as he moved, twisted pipes, jagged plates of metal, even a shattered helmet with a cracked visor. He piled them near a ledge above the drones, working quietly, as his breath echoed in the still air. He then struck a shard of crystal against the metal, creating a sharp spark. The drones immediately shifted their attention toward the noise, their beams cutting across the cavern. Marcus seized the moment and hurled the pile of debris down the opposite side of the chamber. The crash was deafening, and the machines spun in unison, unleashing bursts of plasma fire into the empty space. Marcus sprinted from his perch, weaving between shadows and sliding behind a support beam that shuddered from the impact of their fire. The drones fanned out to pursue the false target, their formation splitting. Marcus used the gap to crawl toward the trapped woman. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes half closed, but when she saw him, she whispered faintly, "Human." He pressed a finger to his lips and began examining the wreckage. A heavy girder pinned her lower body, crushed against stone. Marcus tested its weight, but even his strength could not shift it. He looked up, seeing the cracked supports above. If he could force the right collapse, he might free her, but it risked burying them all. He leaned close to her, speaking in a low, steady voice. "I will get you out, but you must not move or call out." She nodded weakly, her hand reaching to clasp his wrist with surprising strength for someone so broken. Marcus scanned the beams above, calculating quickly, then turned back toward the shadows where Cale hid. He signaled the boy to stay down and prepared himself. He pulled a small charge from his belt, a relic of his days scavenging war zones. It was old, but still functional. He set it against the base of a fractured column, then retreated back to the woman, covering her with his body as he triggered it. The charge went off with a sharp crack, the cavern shuddering as stone and steel rained down. The targeted section collapsed exactly as he hoped, the heavy girder shifting and rolling free from the woman's legs. She gasped in pain as Marcus dragged her clear of the rubble, his muscles straining but his determination unyielding. The drones whirled back toward the sound of the explosion, their sensors locking on the human's movement. Marcus lifted his rifle one-handed while supporting the woman with the other, and fired bolt after bolt of searing energy to drive them back. Sparks flew as two drones collapsed, but the others advanced, their weapons charging. Cale could no longer stay hidden. He leapt from the shadows, his voice breaking with a desperate cry, distracting the machines just long enough for Marcus to unleash another volley. The chamber filled with smoke and fire as drones fell sparking against the rubble. When the last one collapsed, Marcus turned to Cale and the boy's mother, pulling them both close. He could hear the cavern groaning under the damage he had caused, more sections of the roof trembling, ready to fall. He whispered fiercely, "We must leave now, or this whole place will bury us alive." He lifted the mother across his shoulders, her body weak but still clinging to life, and gestured for Cale to follow. As they staggered toward the narrow tunnel that had brought them here, Marcus felt the stone shift and the heat of burning circuits closing in. He knew the fight was not over. The mine was crumbling, and something worse than drones might already be stirring in the depths, but he also knew he would not stop until he carried them both to safety. Marcus carried the alien woman across his shoulders, her weight pressing down, but his steps firm as Cale ran close beside him, clutching the cracked shard of crystal that gave off only a faint glow. The tunnel shook with the aftermath of the collapse, dust filling the air and stones tumbling from the ceiling. Every groan of metal and distant echo warned that the mine was on the edge of total ruin, yet Marcus did not falter. He had been in worse places and carried heavier burdens. The difference this time was that the life he carried was not his comrade or kin, but a stranger, and still he gave everything to move forward. The woman stirred, against his back, her voice a broken whisper asking about her son. Kyle rushed closer, answering with a trembling cry that he was here beside her and that the human had saved them. She reached out her hand to touch Cale's cheek before her strength failed and she fell silent again. Marcus assured the boy she was still breathing, but they had to move faster. The tunnel ahead branched in two, one path descending deeper into darkness, the other rising toward a faint glimmer of light. Marcus stopped, for only a moment, to listen. The faint sound of claws dragging across stone came from below. The predators were not done with them. He chose the rising path, urging Cale to stay close. His own breath came heavy, but his mind remained sharp, calculating each step to avoid unstable ground. He could feel the heat from the drone's wreckage still lingering behind them, and knew that the noise of battle had roused every lurking thing in the depths of this place. Kyle stumbled, but Marcus caught him, with one hand pulling him forward. The boy looked up at him with wide eyes filled with admiration and fear. "You could have left us," he whispered. "You could have run when you first heard me, but you stayed. Why?" Marcus glanced down, his face hardened, but his voice steady, because walking away would mean becoming like those who abandoned you and your mother. "I have done enough running in my life. This time, I choose to stand." The boy nodded, silent tears on his cheeks, and Marcus knew then that trust had rooted itself deep between them. As they climbed, the passage narrowed until they reached a section blocked by collapsed stone. Marcus set the mother down gently and began to clear the rocks with his bare hands, each stone scraping his palms raw. He grunted with effort, muscles straining. Cale tried to help, his small hands prying at stones that were too heavy for him, but Marcus did not stop him. Every effort mattered. Every attempt to free the path gave the boy strength. When the last stone Gave way, Marcus pushed through, pulling the woman along carefully, but the moment they stepped into the open chamber beyond, he froze. The space was filled with pale light from a cluster of glowing crystals embedded in the walls, and the sight revealed the truth of the predators nestled among the rocks were eggs, dozens of them pulsing faintly with inner fire, and around them stalked the largest beast, yet its massive form coiled like a serpent, its eyes reflecting the crystal light with hunger. It lifted its head at their entrance, loosing a guttural roar that shook Cale to the core. The boy clung to Marcus in terror, whispering that this was the brood mother, the reason the mine had fallen. Marcus knew they had no choice. They could not turn back, and they could not fight in the tight chamber with the woman injured and Cale unarmed. He studied the crystals, remembering how the shard Cale carried had flared brightly when struck. He pulled one from the wall, feeling the hum of energy within, and struck it hard against his rifle. The crystal burst into blinding light, flooding the chamber. The beast roared, thrashing in confusion as Marcus seized the chance, dragging the mother forward and shouting for Cale to run. The three of them stumbled past the creature as it smashed against the walls, blinded by the sudden flare. The tunnel ahead sloped upward, the air growing fresher with every step, but behind them, the roar grew louder. The beast recovering and giving chase, Marcus carried the mother with renewed strength, though every muscle screamed with pain. His thoughts sharpened to a single point. He would not let her die. He would not let Cale grow up alone. He pushed forward faster than he thought possible until daylight, faint though, distant, shone through a crack in the stone. He roared with determination, slamming his shoulder into the barrier until it split open, revealing the surface above. They spilled out into the open air, gasping for breath as the light of the star washed over them. The mother lay weak but alive. Cale fell to his knees, sobbing with relief. Marcus stood guard at the opening, rifle raised as the roar echoed from below. The fight was not over, but they had escaped the heart of the mine alive, and that was more than anyone had believed possible. The light of the broken star poured across the jagged surface of the shattered planet, but Marcus knew their fight was far from finished. The mine had given them a moment of escape, yet the roar that echoed from below was a promise that the brood mother would not remain trapped long. Cale clung to his mother's hand as she lay weak upon the rocks, her chest rising with shallow breaths. Marcus bent beside her, checking the wounds left by stone and steel. She had survived, but her body bore deep bruises, and one leg was bent at an angle that spoke of shattered bone. She could not walk, not without help. Marcus wrapped strips of his jacket around her injuries, tightening them enough to hold. He lifted her again across his shoulders, though his own muscles ached and his back throbbed under the weight. Still, his stride was steady, his eyes locked on the horizon. Cale asked where they would go, his voice raw from dust and fear. Marcus scanned the barren land around them, the cracked ground stretching endlessly with only the ruined towers of mining rigs in the distance. "We go to higher ground," he said firmly. "If we stay near the mine, it will hunt us here." Cale nodded, but his small hands trembled. He looked back at the hole from which they had climbed and whispered that the beast had always been here under their feet, watching, waiting. Marcus placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "It will come, but it will not take your mother, not while I still draw breath." They marched across the uneven terrain, the silence broken only by the sound of shifting stone beneath their boots, and the distant groan of metal structures that swayed in the thin wind. Marcus moved quickly but carefully, knowing every step mattered. The woman stirred weakly against his back, whispering gratitude, her voice faint yet filled with something more than relief. She looked at Marcus through tired eyes and said, "Few would risk their lives for strangers. Fewer still, for another species." While Marcus paused but did not look back. He answered simply, "Because no one else came when your son cried out, and I could not let that voice fade into silence." The boy walked close at his side, his eyes no longer filled with only fear but with awe. He began to ask questions about humans, about why Marcus fought the way he did, about why he carried on, even when his body screamed for rest. Marcus gave no grand speeches. He only said that humans had learned to fight because the galaxy never gave them mercy, that every scar carried a lesson and every lesson carried a promise to never surrender. Cale listened wide-eyed, and for the first time since the collapse he smiled faintly, even as tears glistened on his cheeks. Sudden tremor shook the ground, throwing them off balance. Marcus steadied himself but knew what it meant. The broodmother was forcing its way upward, breaking through the tunnels to reach them. He urged Cale to move faster, pushing the boy ahead, while he adjusted the weight of the woman on his shoulders. The ground split behind them, dust erupting into the thin sky, and a roar, unlike any before, shattered the silence. The creature burst from the earth, its massive body twisting and writhing, scales glistening with crystal light, its eyes burning with hunger and hatred. It rose like a mountain alive, its roar echoing across the broken plains. Marcus planted his feet, firmly setting the woman gently on the ground before raising his rifle. He shouted at Cale to take cover behind the rocks and not to move until he called. The boy obeyed, though his eyes burned with terror and defiance. The broodmother lunged, its body crashing against the surface in a wave of dust and stone. Marcus opened fire, the old rifle screaming with each burst of energy. The beams cut into the beast's hide, scorching it black, but the creature barely slowed. It swept a claw across the ground, forcing Marcus to dive aside. The force of the strike split the earth where he had stood. Marcus rolled to his feet, his breath ragged but his mind clear. He had fought impossible odds before, and he knew that fear was only useful if it sharpened the will. He looked to the mother and child, their eyes fixed on him with all the hope they had left, and he made his choice. He would not retreat. He shouted to Kyle, "Run when I tell you, and do not stop until you reach the ridge." Kyle shouted, "Back." "No, I will not leave you," but Marcus's voice thundered like iron. "You will do as I say, or we all die here." The boy bit his lip but nodded, tears streaming down his face. The beast roared again, closing the distance. Marcus stood his ground, knowing this fight was more than survival. It was the test of everything humanity was known for in whispers across the stars. A refusal to break, a refusal to surrender. He tightened his grip on the rifle, feeling every scar and memory sharpen into resolve. The battle for their lives had begun, and he would hold the line until the last breath if that was what it took. The broodmother towered over the broken plain, its shadow swallowing the rocks where Cale and his mother huddled. The ground quaked with every step of its many clawed limbs, its jaws dripping with saliva that hissed when it struck the stone. Marcus stood before it, battered, exhausted, and carrying wounds that burned with every breath. Yet his eyes were steady. His rifle hummed weakly, its power nearly drained, but he raised it with a defiance that made Cale believe for the first time that perhaps even such a monster could be stopped. The beast lunged with terrifying speed, its bulk crashing forward. Marcus rolled aside, firing at its eyes. The beam struck true, scorching its vision and drawing a shriek that split the sky. The creature thrashed, sending boulders tumbling around them. Marcus used the chaos to dart closer, sliding beneath its body, where its scales were thinner. He fired again at the soft underbelly, the blast searing into flesh. The smell of burnt meat filled the air, and the brood mother roared in agony, slamming its body against the ground. Marcus was thrown aside, his weapon clattering across the rocks. He landed hard, his body screaming in protest, but he forced himself back onto his knees. Kyle cried out desperate, but Marcus raised a hand to calm him, shouting that he must stay with his mother. The boy obeyed, though every part of him wanted to rush. To the human side, Marcus searched the ground, his eyes falling on the glowing crystals that jutted from the plain. He remembered how they had blinded the beast in the tunnels. He dragged himself toward them, ignoring the pain that seared through his chest. He ripped one from the ground, feeling the surge of energy pulse in his palm. The beast loomed above him, preparing to crush him with one colossal strike. Marcus slammed the crystal against the rocks, shattering it in a burst of blinding light. The broodmother reeled, thrashing its head and bellowing in fury. Marcus seized the moment, hurling himself toward his fallen rifle. He grabbed it, rolled to his back, and unleashed everything the weapon had left into the beast's open maw. The blast tore through the roof of its mouth, exploding in showers of sparks and blood. The creature convulsed, its scream rising into a deafening wail before it collapsed with a thunderous crash, shaking the ground for miles. The dust rose in choking clouds as silence fell, broken only by the ragged breaths of the survivors. Cale ran from his cover, tears streaming down his cheeks as he threw his arms around Marcus, crying that he had done it, that he had saved them. Marcus dropped the empty rifle, his chest heaving. He placed a tired hand on the boy's head and whispered, "Not me, us, your courage, your mother's will, and my strength together. That is what saved us." Kyle nodded fiercely, though his words broke with sobs. "You did not give up, you never gave up." Marcus looked toward the horizon where the broken star cast its dim light across the barren world. His voice was heavy but proud. "That is what it means to be human." The alien mother reached out weakly, her voice frail, yet filled with gratitude. She told Marcus that no words could ever repay what he had done for them, that her people would sing of this act across the stars. He shook his head gently, saying, "I did not do this for songs or for glory. I did this because your son called for help, and no one should be left unheard." She smiled through her pain, whispering, "Then know this, human. You have changed more than our lives. You have changed how we will see your kind." They made their way toward the ridge, Marcus carrying the woman, once more Cale walking close at his side. The air was cool, the dust settling behind them. The mine lay in ruins, the brood mother dead, its brood buried in the collapse. But from that destruction, hope had been born. As they reached the crest of the ridge, the sky stretched wide before them, filled with stars. The woman lifted her head slightly, gazing at the endless expanse, and whispered that she would live to see them again, because a human had chosen compassion over indifference. Kyle turned to Marcus, his small face fierce with determination. He said he would tell everyone of the human who had saved his mother, who had fought the broodmother with nothing but grit and heart. Marcus smiled faintly, his scars deep but his eyes warm. "Tell them the truth," he said. "Tell them humans do not walk away when someone calls for help. Tell them we endure." The wind swept across the ridge, carrying the boy's voice as he promised to remember always. Marcus stood beside him, weary, yet unbroken, staring at the horizon where the stars beckoned. The galaxy would hear this tale, and it would not forget. The cry of a child had been answered by a lone human, and in that answer, a bond had been forged that would echo far beyond this dying world. The ridge stretched wide before them, the sky heavy with stars, and the ruins of the mine glowing faintly behind them, like a scar on the land. Marcus stood tall, though his body ached every step, reminding him of the battles fought, and the weight carried, yet he did not falter. The alien mother rested against his side, alive though weak, her breath shallow but steady. Kyle clung to her other hand, his eyes filled with relief and pride. For the first time since the collapse, his fear was gone, replaced by something brighter. When he looked at Marcus, he did not see only a stranger, he saw a shield, a warrior, and a friend. They walked together along the broken plain, their shadows long against the fractured ground. Cale began to speak softly, telling his mother every detail of what had happened, how Marcus had fought the beasts, how he had tricked the drones, how he had refused to give up no matter the danger. She listened with tears shining in her eyes, whispering that she owed her life and more to the human who had stood for them. Marcus said nothing. He simply kept moving, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He did not crave thanks or reward, only the knowledge that he had chosen the path that felt right. The sky rumbled faintly as the brood mother's corpse settled deeper into the ruin below, the last echo of its fury fading into silence. The planet itself seemed to exhale a long-held breath. The danger gone for now. Cale lifted his face to the stars, his voice rising with determination. He declared that their people would know of this day, that the story of the human who answered a cry would spread beyond this shattered world. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder, steady and firm, saying only, "Tell them the truth. Tell them that when all else failed, compassion and courage lit the way." They reached the high ridge where the land opened wide and the stars blazed endless. Marcus set the mother down gently upon a flat stone and sat beside her, his body heavy, but his spirit unbroken. The wind carried the sound of their breathing, the silence between them filled with meaning. The mother reached for his hand, her voice faint but resolute, saying that humanity would never be forgotten by her people because of what he had done. Kyle pressed close to them both, whispering fiercely that he would remember every word, every moment, and carry it with him. Always, Marcus looked out across the vast horizon, the stars gleaming cold and eternal. His face was marked with dust and scars, but his eyes held the fire of resolve. He had fought not for glory, not for conquest, but for the simple cry of a child in need. And in answering it, he had shaped the future more than any battle could he knew. The galaxy would one day hear of this story, and he hoped it would remind them that humanity's strength was not only in its power to fight, but in its refusal to abandon hope. The boy leaned against him, his mother resting beside them, the three of them bound now by survival and gratitude. Above them, the stars shimmered as if listening to the promise that their voices carried into the night. A promise that compassion mattered, that strength meant more when shared, and that even in the darkest places, light could be found in the heart of a human. The Siriditi. Wind grew still, the silence deep, and the journey ahead uncertain. But for this moment they were together, alive and unbroken, and that was enough. The end.